Masechet Sotah, Daf Mem Zayin, some fantastic agada. We left off talking about the importance of accompanying someone when they are leaving, especially if they're leaving the city. And anytime one should accompany a rabbi, a teacher, a student, a colleague. We talked about how far they should be accompanied. And we brought a number of examples. And the last one was regarding Elisha. When he traveled from Yericho to Bet El, nobody accompanied him, and then there was a terrible incident of some children who were calling him Baldy, and he got upset, cursed them, and bears came and ate 42 and killed 42 of them. A terrible story. But if someone had accompanied Elisha, then they would have been able to intervene, told the kids to go home, and then that would not have happened. Once we bring up the story, we're going to go and analyze it further. So what exactly happened there? Amru lo aleh shehikrachta alenu et hamakom. So when they called him Baldy, it wasn't, maybe he was bald, maybe he wasn't, but it wasn't literally because of that, but rather that figuratively, he made the place bald. What happened? If we look right before the story here's where he goes to Bet El. Immediately before that, in Yericho, the people of the city said, "Look, the water here is bad, right? The land causes bereavement." And so Elisha told them how to sweeten put salt, and he was able to make the water better. He healed the water, and so now everything is fine. So the Midrash is filling in what's the connection between these stories here, and saying apparently the people of Bet El supplied water for the people of Yericho because the water was no good in Yericho. And now that Elisha healed the water of Yericho, they no longer needed to buy the water from Bet El, and Bet El was now bald from having that business. And so they were upset at Elisha. That's why they were bothering him. Okay, now my unarim ketanim. What does this phrase mean? I mean, it's a peshat. It just means they were young children. But in halachic terms, na'ad is 12-year-old or so on. Katan is under that. So what are they? Are they na'arim or are they ketanim? So this too we're taking not literally, which also helps read the story because, right, what's Elisha doing? Going and calling upon bears to kill young kids just because they're poking fun at his bald head. That's not really a good reason to have them killed. So therefore we say no, it doesn't mean that they were young, but rather that they are emptied out of mitzvot. So these might have been whatever age they were, empty people. Ketanim shayu meketanim emana, and they weren't young either. Rather, they were, in what way were they small? They were small in their face, in their faith. And so you have these, maybe they were adults, and these were low lives. People had no mitzvot and no faith, and they're coming. They just lost a customer for their free water, for their water business. They could have helped for free instead, if another neighbor didn't have water. Anyway, so they're complaining about their loss of business, and they're coming to this great prophet and complaining to him and calling him names. It puts a completely different context upon the story. So Tana ne'adim hayu ubizbezu atzman kiktanim, or another interpretation, ne'adim, they were young, but not so young. The problem is that they acted like little children. That's the problem. They were like little children. Okay. Matkif la Rav Yosef Dilma al Shem Mekoman. Wait a second. How do you know that ne'adim means that they were emptied of mitzvot? Maybe it means that they were from a place called Ne'oran. Mila ketiv aram yasu gedudim ve'ishbu me'eretz Yisrael na'ara ketana. This is another story about Elisha also, that the Arameans came out and they took captive from Eretz Yisrael. They took captive, says a minor young woman, which again in Peshat just means they took a young Jewish woman captive. That'll be important for the rest of the story, because this young woman becomes a maidservant who eventually tells Naaman that he should go to Israel and to Elisha to be healed of his leprosy. So she plays an important role. But anyway, the question here is, in halachic terms, Na'ara is 12 and so, or so. Ketana is less than that. So is she Na'ara or is she Ketana? Because Na'ara uktana, avamar Rabbi Pedat, Ketana demi Ne'oran. No, so we resolve it there by saying that she was, in fact, a child, and she's called Na'ara because she's from a city called Ne'oran. And we know the city today. It's Na'aran. It's near Jericho. You can go find it. Hatam, so why don't we say here the same thing and resolve that in fact they were children, and it's called Na'ad, they're called Ne'arim because they were from this place. The answer is Hatam la mefarash mekoma hacha mefarash mekoman. There, regarding this young girl, doesn't say a place, so that's why we can say that Na'ara means that she was from that place. Whereas here in this story about the boys that were making fun of Elisha, it says their place. It says they're from Yericho. So if they're from Yericho, you can't say that they were from a different place. So that's what we have to give that interpretation above. Pasuk says that Elisha turned behind him, saw these kids, and cursed them in the name of Hashem. Mara'a, what did when he saw? What did he see? 4 interpretations. Amarav ra'a mamash kedetanya Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer kol makom shenatu chachamim enehem o mita o oni. Maybe it means literally. He looked at them. He gave them the stare of death. As Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, wherever the sages place their eyes against a certain person, like, the Bishop Bar Yochai's laser eyes that burnt everything up, so they will cause either death or poverty if they look at someone the wrong way. Ushmuel amar ra'a shekulan nit'abera bahen iman b'yom kippurin. Or saw is not seeing physically. He saw something about them, something about their past, that they all were conceived on Yom Kippur when husbands and wives are not allowed to be together, and so they were all conceived in sin, and that resulted in these bad traits that they had. He turned around, he saw that they had these locks, these braids, like non-Jews have. These kids were assimilated, having these types of pagan braids. Or he saw that they have not even a little bit of a mitzvah. Right? So again, all these explanations are helping us to contextualize the story, because it wouldn't be right or make sense to just have little kids killed. Rather, these are people who had, a terrible past and had no mitzvot and had nothing, no redeeming qualities, and therefore were deserving of the fate that they got. Hold on, even if they don't have mitzvot, maybe their descendants will have mitzvot. Maybe there's potential, and give them a chance. Be patient. No, Elisha saw that they have not even the potential for mitzvot, not them, not their descendants, for all generations, and therefore better that they not be around. Okay, ותעשינה שתיים דובים מן היער ותבקענה מהם 42 ילדים. And so then, as a result, these bears came out of the forest and tore apart 42 children. Hadamar nes v'chadamar nes betoch nes. So this happened miraculously, because there weren't any bears actually around there, and these bears suddenly appeared. So there's machloket whether this is a single miracle or a double miracle. Madamar nes ya'ad hava dubim lahavu. One who said that it was a single miracle says there was a forest, in fact, nearby, and their bears live in forests, but there was still a miracle because there was no bears in that forest. So the miracle is that, yes, there was a forest, but bears appeared in the forest, and so that's the one miracle. Whereas one who says double miracle says that in that place, in the Jericho to Bet El area, there was not even a forest, and so a forest had to be created. And the bears, too, also had to be created. And so that's a double miracle. We ask, wait a second, if you're going to say, once you're going to say it's a double miracle, what's the point of a miracle of creating a forest, right? If the miracle is Elisha needs to make a punishment, so just have bears suddenly appear. and that's sufficient miracle that'll do the job. How does it add more to the miracle to have a forest and that the bears come out of the forest? And the answer is de be'iti, because usually bears are frightened to come out into civilization. Apparently, this is true. If a human being comes into the bear's domain, then the bears will attack. But bears generally stay in their domain, in the forest, and don't come out to where human beings are living. And so the double miracle here is that not only did bears appear, but these bears overcame their natural fear, and they came out into civilization and went and attacked these kids, people, wherever they were. קורבנות שהקריב בלק מלך מואב הובקעו מישראל 42 ילדים. Now, we have to the Gemara still wants to explain further, right? What sin? What terrible thing? It already gave a number of explanations, but we're adding even more, right? Because this is a very serious punishment for these 42 kids, however old they were, people that had bad backgrounds, bad futures, right? Still, what was the further background of it? So Rabbi Chanina says it's because of the 42 korbanot that Balak Melech Moav sacrificed with Bilam, even though they had negative intention, they were making these korbanot on all the different mountains in order to curse Bnei Israel. Nevertheless, there's a positive aspect to it, that they made these nice korbanot. And because of, in merit of that, even though the curse did not happen at that time during Bilam, but it did fall upon Israel eventually in this form of these 42 kids being killed by bears. Now we have a question, because there's another statement about these 42 sacrifices. We saw this earlier in the Masechet, that a person should always learn Torah, even if it's not for its own sake, even if it's for an external reward, because by doing it not for its own sake, you'll come to do it lishma. שבשכר 42 קורבנות שהקריב בלק מלך מואב זכה ויעשתה ממנו רות שיעשה ממנו שלמה שכתוב ב-1000 עולות יעלה שלמה ואמר רבי יוסי בן חוני רות ביתו של עגלון בנו של בלק הייתה. And so here an example of doing something not for the right intention, but it's still being worthwhile. And this is even a more extreme example than learning Torah. Learning Torah is a good thing, right? So even if you're doing it for self-interest, for money, still it's a positive thing, but so it's still okay because it'll lead to a good thing. We see even more extreme example that in merit of the 42 korbanot that Balak made, he was doing it for negative intention to try to curse them, yet it was still a positive act in and of itself. In merit for that, he got to have as one of his descendants Ruth, who's one of her descendants was King Shlomo, and King Shlomo gave 1,000 olot. And Rabbi Yosef ben Choni said, Ruth she is a Moabite, and in fact, she's from Eglon, who is the son of Balak, so she's a direct descendant of Balak. And so here we see a different interpretation, that also saying that it's good that they made these sacrifices, Balak, but here it says he got rewarded for it by having Ruth and Shlomo be part of his descendants. And so that's different from what we said up here, that he got in reward for that, of those korbanot, the curse still worked somewhat in that it led to the eventual destruction of these 42 kids. So which one is it? And the answer is Ta'avato miha liklala have, because yes, there is a good and bad aspect to what he did, Balak. On the one hand, he made the sacrifices, and that was a good thing, so he gets rewarded with having Shlomo, who gave even more sacrifices. So his good sacrifices had midah keneged midah, even more reward for more sacrifices, and going through Ruth. So that's the positive part. The negative part is that even though the curse that he had said did not work then, and was actually the opposite, Balaam ended up blessing them, nevertheless, because his intention was for cursing, and he gave these sacrifices, so a bit of his curse remained and eventually applied in the time of Elisha. So this is an interesting and somewhat difficult agadah, that an evil person's evil desire to curse without any good rationale should still come true somehow. Right, but maybe that combined with the fact that these people were lowlives and they did negative things and so on. So then that power, with a so-called power or application of that curse, did eventually apply at this time. All right, ויאמרו אנשי העיר אל אלישע, הנה נא מושב העיר טוב, כאשר אדוני רואה. Now, related to Elisha, in that scene, the people in Beit El come and say to Elisha, right, this place is good, as you can see, however, the water is bad, the land miscarries. So we're going back to that story to analyze it. This is very confusing. The people say, this is the best, what a very pleasant city this is here in Yericho, except that the water is terrible and everyone's dying. Well, what's good about the city if it has bad water and everybody dies? So Rabbi Chanin says that the grace of a place is upon its inhabitants. In other words, when people live in a certain place, they develop a connection to it, a love for it, even if it's a terrible place, right? Even if you're living in the middle of Brooklyn with, garbage and crime and whatever, but because you're living here and you grew up here and you're used to it, so you end up having an attachment and a love for it, even if it's really actually a bad place. I think it's interesting that so to be Chanin that talks about Chen. And similarly, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shelosha chinot hen makom al yoshebav, chen isha al ba'ala, chen mikach al mikacho. And there's actually three types of phenomenon like this that are all similar. One is the grace of a place upon its inhabitants. People that live in a place tend to like it, and also the grace of a woman upon her husband. So even if a wife has faults, but when a husband is in love with her, he overlooks the faults, right? Love conquers all, and he only sees the good in her. And similarly, when you buy something, right, then you only see the good, you see it in a positive light. This is a positive feedback reinforcement. Once someone makes a decision, psychologists talk about this a lot, right? After you make a decision, then your brain is pre-programmed to convince yourself that it was a good decision. So if you decide to live in the place or buy something or marry someone, then you're automatically going to see the good in that decision that you made, which makes sense. It is a positive thing that will lead to general happiness, although sometimes it could blind us for the negative things that might be in a certain place, and even if we should maybe move. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan, Shelosha cholaim chala Elisha. Now back to Elisha. He was sick 3 times. Echad shegira dubim betinokot. Elisha was punished for causing the bears to go and kill these children. So even though we just kind of tried to give some justification for it, that they were evildoers and had no future and had no mitzvot and all that, but nevertheless, Elisha should not have done this, and he got sick because of it. And second, because he rejected Gehazi with 2 hands, utterly, totally not giving Gehazi any possibility of return. We'll talk more about the Gehazi story in a minute. And the final sickness was just a regular natural sickness that he eventually died for. And we derive from the triple statement here that Elisha was sick from a sickness and he died. So the repetition here became, this is the one sickness, another sickness, and then it doesn't say choliot 3 times, but it says asher yamut bo, so we take that as a third sickness that eventually caused his death. So let's analyze. Tanu Rabbanan, olam tehsimol doha ve'yamin mekarebet ve'lo ke'elisha shedechavo legehazi b'shtei yadav ve'lo ke'Yoshua ben Pedachia shedechavo leYeshu haNosri mitamidav b'shtei yadav. So here is a very important teaching. A person should always have the left hand push away, and the right hand bring close. Whenever you're in a difficult situation with a child, a student, a friend, where you have to they do something wrong and you have to give some kind of criticism and it's unacceptable what they did. So yes, you have to express that it's unacceptable and you have to push them away. However, if you push them away with two hands, then they'll say, oh, look, I'm completely rejected, and they'll just say, there's no hope for me, and they'll go off and do even worse, because there's no teshuvah. So the advice of the rabbis is, on the one hand, with the weaker left hand, you push away and say, this is no good, I cannot accept this. At the same time, you have to show that I still love you unconditionally. And the right hand should say, there's a way back. You can make teshuvah, and you're still connected, you're still part of the family, you're still part of the community or nation. And so you need both of that, because that you have to express what's wrong, but you also have to allow a possibility for return. And so that's the proper way to deal with difficult situations and objectionable actions. And you should not do what Elisha did, because when Gehazi did something wrong, which we'll see, he pushed him away with two hands. And a famous sage, Yoshua ben Perachia, pushed away Yeshu HaNotzri. That's the founder of our cousin religion. And it was one of his students. And because Yeshu did something wrong, which we'll see, however, instead of objecting to it, but also giving him a way back, Yoshua ben Perachia, his teacher, pushed him away completely. And because Yeshua had no way back, so he said, you know what, let me go and I'm going to reject Judaism totally, go to Avodah Zarah, found a new religion, and the rest is history. So it's all because of this, right, for this moment at the beginning. I should add a quick note here that this story actually does not appear in some editions of the printed Talmud, because it was removed by censors. These would either be Christian censors or Jews who were afraid that if Christians found it, because they would look through these books and they found something against that spoke against their founder, then the Christians would come and burn the entire Talmud and cause a lot of trouble. And so therefore this was expunged from some versions of the Talmud. But you can see right here, see in the regular printed Vilna Shas that you buy now, it is in fact in there, except that it doesn't mention Yeshu's name. It just says Shedechafole had mitalmidav, a student. So therefore, if it doesn't mention his name, then that would prevent the censors from knowing who it's about. But in fact, if you look at the Venice edition and the Munich manuscript, and Oxford and the Vatican manuscript, all of them do have Yeshu HaNosri, and they have the story in full. So this is, in fact, the story does belong here, and it is a story that did mention Yeshu originally. Okay, so these two very important stories. Elisha Mahi, what happened with Elisha? Dichtiv, Vayomer Naaman Hoel Kach Kikarim, Uchtiv, Vayomer Elav Lo Libi Lahachalach Kasher Afach Ish Me'al Merkabto Likratecha Ha'et Lakachat Et Kesef HaKesef Velakachat Begadim V'Zetim Uchlamim V'Son Bakar V'Avadim Ushvachot. The story there, as we said before, is Naaman, the foreigner. He got sarat. What am I going to do? And so this maidservant that the Jewish maidservant said, go to the Israelites. And then Elisha got involved, and Elisha said, don't go dunk in the Jordan, and you'll be fine. And he did. And then he was healed, and he was so thankful. Naaman was so thankful. He went to Elisha and said, please, let me give you a gift. I want to show my thanks. And Elisha says, I will not accept any gift. Right? He's doing it totally l'shem shamayim. He made a wonderful kiddush Hashem. Naaman became monotheistic, and that was thanks enough. So Elisha, right, to his credit, did not accept any gift. But then Gehazi, who was the student of servant of Elisha, Gehazi said, oh, what a shame to reject these gifts. He has nice gifts to give. And so after Naaman left, Gehazi ran after him and said, actually, you know what? We'll take some gifts. And so Gehazi goes and takes some of the gifts when Elisha said not to. And so Elisha knew exactly what happened. He says, right, I know what happened. Did my not heart go? And when he turned back from his chariot to meet you, Naaman, right, saw you running after him. And then Elisha rebukes Gehazi. And he says, this is a time to take money, to take garments and olives and vineyards and sheep and servants and maidservants. What are you going to do with this money that he gave? You're going to go buy stuff and gain monetarily from this good act that we did? You ruined the whole thing. So Elisha gives very severe criticism to Gehazi, and you could understand Elisha because Gehazi really went out of line in going ahead and taking money when Elisha expressly said, we're not going to take money for this. So we understand that Gehazi was upset. However, still, he pushed him away with two hands and didn't allow Gehazi a way back. Okay, Yomi Shakil Kulahai. Now we ask, what did Gehazi take? Right, Kesef B'Gadimu de Shakil. He took a little money, a little garments. Like, it's not like he took that much. It was, a sum, but not such a big deal that he should have been so upset. אמר רבי יצחק, באותה שעה היה אלישע עוסק בשמונה שרסים. אמר לו רשע, הגיע העת ליטול שכר שמונה שרסים. So, at that time, Elisha happened to be learning some of the laws about the 8 creeping animals that are not kosher. And this is what they were learning together. And so it just happened to be what they were learning. And so when he saw what Gehazi did, he said, Rasha, he called him evil, an evil person. And it says all this merit from this learning, you're going to get now, and you're going to lose your olam haba. Okay, and furthermore, not only olam haba, but even now, the leprosy that Naaman had that was healed is going to be upon you, Gehazi, for taking this money. Now, a following story, soon after this story in Sefer Melachim, is the story about 4 people who are Mesora'im, a whole story over there. It doesn't identify the people. Rabbi Yochanan connects the stories together and said, you know who those Mesora'im were? It was Gehazi and his children, because right before it says, Elisha says, you're going to get Sadat, and so it makes sense to connect these 4 Mesora'im to those 4 people. Okay, Elisha Damesek. Now, the next story after that, Elisha comes to Damascus. Lama halach? Why did he go there? Amar Rabbi Yochanan shalach lachaziro leGehazi b'tshuba velo hazar. So he realized that he really gave it. He was too harsh to Gehazi, and he went there to tell Gehazi that he can repent, try to get him to repent. But Gehazi refused. Amar lo hazor bech. Elisha said, repent, right? You did something wrong. Repent, and you can come back. אמר לו, כך מקובלני ממך כל מי שחטא וחטאת הרבים, אין מספיקים בידו לעשות תשובה. And Gehazi said, no, I don't believe you, because you yourself taught me that anyone who not only sins but causes others to sin, there's no possibility of making teshuvah. You can make teshuvah if you sinned yourself, but then you want to make other people sin. So now, right, how are you going to control? What are you going to do about their actions and the actions that the ripple effect of spreading sin around? So you already taught me that. So therefore, I really have no possibility of teshuvah. So I'm not even going to bother. I may as well just continue being a rasha. My avad, what did Gehazi do that he caused other people to sin? Because so far I just said that he took some money. An amazing thing. He took Even Shoevet, which seems to be a magnet, right? It's a stone that can pull, that has attractive force. And he was, and using these magnets, he was able to take the Egel that Yerovam, the evil king from the north, who set up golden calves, so that the people would stay in the north and not go to Yerushalayim. He got one of these calves to float magically. It wasn't magic. It was by magnets. We can do this today with very sophisticated and strong magnets. But Apparently, he was able to to suspend this metal in the air with magnets, and because he did that, everybody saw the calf flying, and they said, "Wow, this is a miracle!" And they started to worship the calf even more than they had been doing before. And so you see here, not only did he sin, but he caused other people to sin. Or a similar interpretation is that Gehazi put the name of God's name on the mouth of the golden calf of Yerovam, and that allowed it to speak. And it was saying Anochi, the first two commandments, as if the calf was saying, I am the one that took you out of Egypt. Have no other gods. I am your God. And when people saw that, a miracle, so they said, "Oh, this is really must be the actual God," and then they were worshiping Avodah Zarah even more than they had before. So this is the terrible sin, and so once Gehazi did that, he knew that he thought that there's no possibility for him to make teshuvah. What led him to do such a terrible thing? Well, one thing led to another. He started off just doing a small evil deed by going and taking some money. He's like, "It's a shame, we helped out Naaman. He's offering some coins, so why not take it?" He didn't take that much. He went against his teacher. It was a serious thing, but not the end of the world. But because Elisha reacted so strongly, said, "You have no olam haba, you have no olam hazeh, you and your children are mesora'im." He really called him a rasha, really gave it to him. He said, "Okay, I have no hope. I may as well go over to the dark side." And so indirectly, Elisha caused this to happen by pushing Gehazi away so strongly. דכתיב, ויאמרו בני הנביאים אל אלישע, הנה נא מקום אשר אנחנו יושבים שם לפניך, סר ממנו, מכלל דעת העידנה להבדחק. Another interpretation of Gehazi's sin, and that he caused the public to sin, is that he would push away sages from coming to learn from Elisha. He was kind of the gatekeeper, and people would come and say, "We want to attend the classes by Elisha. We want to come to his school." And he said, "No, you're not worthy. Go away. It's full." And he caused them not to come. So he caused Torah not to be learned. And where do we see that? Because in story right there in that context, it says that the Bnei Nevi'im told Elisha, "Oh, the place is too small for us," right? And the Bnei Nevi'im, the people that are coming to study Nevuah, right, had no place. We need a bigger area. So how come all of a sudden there was no space? It means that there were fewer students before, and now there were more students. How come there were more students now? Because before, that's when Gehazi was around, and he was rejecting all these students and sending them away. Once Gehazi was punished and went away, now all those students came. And so now we realized how many more students came. This is reminiscent of Rabban Gamliel, who when he was Nasi, he wouldn't let the students into the door of the Bet Midrash. And when they deposed him, all the students came in, and more Torah, all the problems were solved, and more Torah was taught. Right? So this is similar. You have to have admission standards for sure. But you shouldn't keep them too high, because it may keep out people that are very worthy and can learn Torah and can contribute. Okay, so that shows that until then, it was not cramped. So that's another interpretation. He was choteh and mahati, and that's why he at least believed that he had no possibility of teshuvah at that point. Okay, that's the story of Gehazi. But now we mentioned another example. Yehoshua ben Perachia, he also pushed away Yeshu HaNotzri with both hands. Kedahavaka katil yanai malkal rabbanan Shimon ben Shatach atminhu achate. When King Yanai, that's Alexander Yanai, one of the evil Hasmonean kings, he was a Sadducee. The famous story when people came and he poured the water libation on his feet on Sukkot, and the people there, the Perushim, saw that and were upset and pelted him with stones. So, in retaliation, Alexander Yanai crucified 800 of the sages. So, very, very evil person. Now, Shimon ben Shatach was able to hide so that he was saved. And he happened to be a brothers-in-law. Shimon ben Shattach's sister was married to Alexander Yanai. Okay, so he was able to save his life in that way. Now, Rabbi Yoshua ben Perachia azal arak l'Alexandria shel Mitzrayim. Rabbi Yoshua ben Perachia, another sage at the time, he ran away to Alexandria to save his life. After the coast was clear and there was peace, so Shimon ben Shattach sent a letter to Yoshua ben Perachia. And the letter was as if one city was talking to another. Mini Yerushalayim ira kodesh lach Alexandria shel Misraim. A letter from me, Jerusalem, the holy city, to you, Alexandria. Achoti, my sister, as if the two cities are sister cities. Ba'ali sharui betochech. My husband is within you, referring to Yoshua ben Perachia. V'ani yoshevet shomema, and I am empty. In other words, Jerusalem says, I need you back. You're a great sage, and you ran away for your life, but now everything, peace is here, so please come back. A nice, beautiful, poetic letter. Amar Shema Mina Havale Shelama. So I got the message that there's peace, so now I can return. Maybe it was written in a kind of code language that he would understand in case it was intercepted by someone. Now, on the way back, he's on the way back. It's a long journey, and so he stops off at a certain inn. The innkeeper knew that this is the famous Rabbi Yoshua ben Perachia, and the innkeeper gave him great honor. Yatev ka mishtabach. And Rabbi Yoshua ben Perachia was sitting and was praising at the inn and saying, what a great host, what a great inn. Thank you so much for your hospitality. Amar le Yeshu HaNosri. And it happened to be at the inn, staying there at the same time, was Yeshu HaNosri. A quick note about his name, right? Yeshu is short for Yehoshua. That his name was simply Yehoshua, or short Yeshua, or even shorter Yeshu. Like Joshua, we shorten to Josh. That was his name, and one is permitted to say his name because it's in the Talmud. The Talmud says his name. So you see that it's permitted, but his last name is really just as a translation of Mashiach, because for those who believe that he was Mashiach, they added that last name. But in fact, his last name was Hanotzri, meaning from Nazareth, which is where he was from. So that it's okay to call him this name, Yeshu Hanotzri. That's his first name, Josh from Nazareth. Okay. Usually when people don't want to say his name, and the halacha of not saying one's name because it says Shem Elohim Acherim Lo Tazkiru, one's not allowed to say the name of foreign gods. That means in a swear or giving it importance, but to say his name in a story, as the Talmud it does here, or as the Tanakh does, it mentions names of Baal and Asherah. These are all names of gods, which are also false gods, but permitted to say if you're reading Nevi'im are saying what was wrong with them, but don't believe them, and not giving them significance or importance, and certainly not swearing in their name. Okay, so that's important to note that his name does appear here, and can be said depending on the context. Or to be Einecha Terutot, Eneha Terutot, and so Yeshu is there and says, after he hears all this praise, he tells Rabbi Yoshua ben Perachia, my teacher, who was his teacher, he said, what do you mean? You're praising the host, but look at the hostess's eyes. Her eyes are kind of narrow. She's not very pretty. Rabbi Yoshua ben Perachia tells Yeshu, this is what you're looking at? I was talking about the praise of look how they treat their guests, look how they give great honor to me. I'm very happy here. It's a good pillows, good beds, good food. And what are you looking at? You're looking at the host. It happened to be in those times, often the inn and the innkeeper, they would do immoral acts with the guests. So he see Yeshu is looking at how beautiful is the innkeeper. Oh, she's kind of ugly. He says, Rasha, this is what you're thinking about. Rabbi Yosef ben Berechia takes out 400 shofars. Why is he traveling with 400 shofars? He's not. There's an exaggeration. When you would excommunicate someone, you have to announce the excommunication. So you do that by blowing a shofar. And so he blew the shofar, said, this Yeshu is excommunicated. Yeshu felt bad, and every day he would come and says, I made teshuvah, I'm sorry, you're right, I shouldn't, I was looking at her beauty, I said something mean about her, lashon hara, wrong priorities, and I shouldn't have done that. I want to make teshuvah. But Rabbi Yosef ben Berechia was very strict and did not accept his teshuvah. So you see, right, Rabbi Yosef ben Berechia pushed him away with two hands. Of course, you have to object. It's not proper thing to be thinking about and saying. But nevertheless, he should have pushed with the left hand, but allowed a way back with the right hand. He learned his lesson. Yom Ahad hava kari keriyat shema ata lekame hava b'da'ate lekabule. One day, Rabbi Yosef ben Berechia was saying Shema, and Yeshu came to him, and again to apologize. And that day, Rabbi Yosef ben Berechia finally he said, you know what? I'm going to accept him back. But since he was saying Shema, he couldn't talk. So he made some kind of hand gesture, like 1 minute or something, or come back, go away, come back later. He made a hand gesture, but it was misunderstood. Yeshu thought he's saying, go away. I'm not accepting your apology, your teshuvah. Azal zekaf libinta pelacha. And Yeshu said, that's it. He's not accepting my teshuvah. I have no chance. I'm never going to be accepted back. And therefore, I may as well go to the dark side. And he went, took a brick, and started worshipping it and did avodah zarah. Amar le chazor becha. Then after that, Rabbi Yosef ben Berechia came to him and said, make teshuvah. Amar le kach bekublani mimecha kol achoter machatir tarabim en maspikin biado la'asot teshuvah. So as I learned from you, my teacher, that anyone who sins and causes others to sin, he will not get a chance to make teshuvah. And now I already caused other people to sin. Where do we see that he caused other people to sin? But so far, he just said something negative. But then afterwards, when he saw that he was not being accepted, he went and did sorcery. He got the masses and incited them to do. He did avodah zarah. He convinced other people to do avodah zarah, and he caused the people to sin. And so that's it. He at least he believed that there was no possibility for him to make teshuvah. And so again here, what a powerful message, that because his teacher pushed him away, yes, which he should have pushed him away for doing something wrong, but he should have also also allowed a way for teshuvah, for him to come back. And because Yosef ben Berechia was too strict and pushed him away with both hands, so then Yeshu, who originally was a rabbi, was a student, so he went over to the dark side totally and started a different religion, one that ended up being the greatest cause of persecution and killing and pogroms and crusades that have tortured the Jews for centuries and centuries. So that is quite a powerful lesson. Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Yeser tinok ve'isha tehesemo doha ve'amin mekarebet. And we conclude with general teaching that regarding Yeser hara, children and women, if a person or a father or a husband needs to reject, they should reject with one hand, but the right hand they should bring it close. Yeser hara, meaning if people have physical desires, you can't reject totally your physical desires. If you try to do that, then you're going to break. Rather, a person should allow his physical desires he should allow himself to achieve his appetite in permitted ways. You have a desire for meat, good, eat kosher meat. You have a desire for a woman, then marry her and have permitted relations. So you shouldn't be a total ascetic and say, I'm never going to get married, I'm never going to eat meat, I'm never going to do anything. So you have to do it in a permitted way, so that way you reject the bad ways of doing it, but you allow the positive ways of doing it. And the same thing with with taking care of a household, with family, something going wrong, you have to reject it, but you have to keep a way back so the person can learn their lesson, and they know that if they know, oh, there's a way back, I can make teshuvah, and then they can come back and be whole again, which are really beautiful lessons and great challenges. The next Mishnah in this very long daf, Nimsa hahoreg ad shelo ne'erfa ha'egla teseh v'tir'eh ba'eder. If they found the killer, he was discovered. Now, egla dufa only applies when we don't know the killer, an unknown murderer. But now we set aside this animal, and now we found the murderer. So if the neck was not broken yet, then you can let the animal go, and it can go graze among the herd back to normal. However, if the neck was already broken, then it should be buried in that spot and treated the same way as a regular egladufa, because in the first place, egladufa comes because of a safek. We don't know who the murderer is. And so it atoned for the lack of oversight, for the fact that blood was spilled. So it fulfilled its purpose, and therefore it continues to be considered the same way. You wouldn't be allowed to grow things there. Similar to Sotah, that also comes because of a safek. So this egladufa has many parallels to Sotah, which makes sense why it's here. And now, in this case, when they already broke the neck and then you find the killer, so we just mentioned that the calf still is buried there, and that killer, he's not off the hook. He still gets capital punishment, right? You don't say, oh, well, this is my replacement. This is my symbolic sacrifice here, right? So now I can go home. No, once you find the killer, he still gets the death penalty. We'll give a source. Ayed ehad omer, ra'iti et hahoreg, ve'ayed ehad omer lo ra'iti. Now, regarding all these cases, how do you know when the killer is found, right? Based how much testimony do you need in order to not do egladufa? This is a different level of testimony than giving capital punishment. For capital punishment, you need 2 witnesses, absolutely, right? Like any case of capital punishment. But to not do egladufa, even 1 witness is sufficient. Now, what if there's contradictory testimony, however? So one witness says, I saw the killer, and one says, no, you did not see it, right? You could not have seen it. Or Isha omeret ra'iti v'isha omeret lo ra'iti lo ra'it hayu orfin. Or the first case is if it's a valid male witness. Here it's a female witness. One says I saw it, one says no, you did not see it. So because it's 1 against 1, they cancel each other out, and we don't know the murderer, and we do egladufa. One witness says, I saw the murderer. 2 said, no, you don't. So all the more so there, the 2 is going to cancel the 1, and you would do egladufa, because we don't know the murder. If 2 people said we saw the murder, and 1 says, no, you didn't see it, well, again, 2 witnesses is going to be the max. And there's absolute proof, and so we're not going to ignore the 1 witness, and therefore we know who the murderer is, and we are not going to do it. We're not going to do egladufa. And here it doesn't matter if the murderer is caught, convicted. If it's known, then you don't do egladufa. On this theme, we note that at some point in time, there were a lot of murderers. They were all around, and then therefore they said no more, the rabbi said no more egladufa at all, because there were a number of known murderers. And so, even though there were bodies that were found here and there, and we don't know in particular who did it, but since there were a number of known murders, it was like a most wanted list, and we said these murderers are going around, so the murderers were known, and therefore, where they couldn't be caught, they were, thugs, and this seems to be could be around the time of the revolution against the rebellion against the Romans, and there were people that were these kind of thugs, revolutionary leaders that were going and killing anyone who was not only killing Romans but even other Jews, like the Sicarii, who we know would go stab people who wanted to make peace with the Romans. So these were really like ancient terrorists. And so, therefore, when they proliferated, the rabbi said, okay, there's no more gladufa because these are known murderers. For example, there was this one man who had two names, Eliezer ben Dinai, and he also went by Tichina ben Perisha. Maybe he had a disguise, and he changed his name to try to evade the authorities, and the people would call him the son of a murderer. He was a known public murderer. This guy is also mentioned by Josephus, a contemporary of Josephus, who was the head of a revolutionary group that would go and kill people, stir up rebellion against the Romans, and kill lots of other Jews who were their political enemies. You had lots of different political groups, and even if they all wanted the same thing, they had so much infighting, they would kill each other. They would kill people like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who wanted to make peace. Right, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai himself was almost killed by such rebellious Jews at the gate when he tried to escape the city of Jerusalem. So this was a terrible time when so many murderers were around, but we know who the murderers were. We even have this guy's name, and so therefore we didn't do a gladufa anymore. Now we're going to have other statements that are in the similar formula. When there were a lot of adulterers proliferated, so they stopped doing sotah. Why? Because Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai hifsikan shene'emar lo yifkoda benechem ki tizneh na ve'al kalotechem ki tenaafna ki hem vegomer. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is the one that stopped it because sotah. The Sotah test only works if the husband is innocent. He did everything properly and never committed adultery. Then the Sotah waters will work to test the wife. However, if the husband himself is immoral, then it doesn't work. And because at this time the adulterers as men were so much, as it says in Hosea, I will not punish your daughters when they commit adultery, nor your daughters-in-law, and not your wives either, because they, the fathers and husbands, consort with zonot, and therefore it will not work. The Gemara will explain, not for their wives, not for their daughters or daughters-in-law either. So because the men were so immoral, therefore the whole sotah process was stopped. Mishemet Yosef ben Yoezer ish Sereda v'Yosef ben Yehuda ish Yerushalayim batluha eshkolot shenemar en eshkol lechol bikora iveta nafshi. Other things that stopped. Yosef ben Yoezer and Yosef ben Yehuda, these were great sages, and they were, as we would call today, Renaissance men. They knew everything. They knew Torah, they knew technology, they knew medicine, they knew philosophy, and so that's called ish eshkolot, is a modern term for a Renaissance man, right? People who were ripe and like a cluster, that they had everything. So these were the last of those great people. As it says, there is no cluster to eat nor first ripe fig that my soul desires, taking the smicha, not literally referring to these great cluster men. Yochanan Kohen Gadol העביר הודיית המעשר, אף הוא ביטל את המעוררין ואת הנוקפין. So Yochanan, the Kohen Gadol, he said, people don't need to say the vidui maaser anymore. The Gemara will explain why. Is this a good thing because everybody was doing maaser so well that they didn't need to say it, or bad because they weren't doing maaser that they can't say it anymore? He also stopped these awakeners. They would wake people up in the morning, but they were doing it the wrong way, and the strikers who, as the Gemara will explain tomorrow, would bang the animals on the head before slaughtering them to stun them so that they wouldn't move, but that is not a good thing to do, so he stopped all that. And ad yamav haya patish makeh b'Yerushalayim, yamav en tzarich lish'ol al hademai. Until their time, there were hammers that were striking during Chol HaMoed, because certain labors are permitted during Chol HaMoed, but it was making a lot of noise and ruining Chol HaMoed, so he stopped it. And in his time, they also stopped the practice of asking about demai, because they made sure that people would be more careful about demai, so you didn't have to ask about it. And all this we'll explain further tomorrow. Gemara, how do we know that if you did a gladufa already, and so the blood of this calf was spilt, then But still, then you find the murderer, that the murderer is not off the hook and he still gets capital punishment. Talmud Omar, because the land will not be atoned for the blood that was spilled in it. Peshat is the blood of the victim that was spilt in it, but we're learning also it will not be atoned by the blood of the Agla Arufa either, but rather only by the dam of the blood of the spiller of the murderer. So if we don't have the murderer, then we have the second best, we do Agla Arufa. But once we find the murderer, even after Agla Arufa, the murderer still has to count for his transgression and gets capital punishment if convicted by two witnesses. So Gemara said, if it's one against one says, I saw the witness, I saw the murder, one says, no, you didn't see him, we cancel each other out. So we can infer that the reason why we say cancel each other out and you still do a gladufa is because they contradict each other. But what if not? What if you just had one witness who says, I saw the murderer? Then he would be believed. Again, not for capital punishment, but he would be believed. So to the extent that we don't do a gladufa. How do we know that? It says it is not known who did it, then you do a gladufa. Hanoda mihikahu afilu echad besof haolam lo hayorfin. That's only if it's not known at all. But if one person knows, even if he's at the other side of the world, then you do not do a gladufa. Only if it's not known at all. Rabbi Akiva Omer, minayin l'sanhedrin shera'u echad sheharag et hanefesh v'mekirin oto shelo hayu orfin tamud omar ve'enenu lo ra'u v'halo ra'u. Rabbi Akiva adds that it could be a witness or it could be a member of the Sanhedrin themselves, one person who saw the murderer, sharaget nefesh, but the rest of the Sanhedrin does not recognize him. But so only one of the judges knows. They still don't do the egladufa because the judges have to come and say, our eyes did not see it. So it has to be unanimous that none of them saw it. And here one of the judges saw it. So then that is the same. No egladufa. השתד אמרת עד אחד מהמן, אידך אחד הכי מעשה מכחיש לה. והמר אולה כל מקום שמן התורה עד אחד הרי כאן שניים ואין דבריו של אחד במקום שניים. Now we're going to go through a shakla v'tarya we've had before. The question here is, when one witness comes and says, I saw the murderer, and the other one says, no, you didn't, why should the second one be believed? After all, Ula said, any time that the Torah says one witness is believed, right, and you generally need two witnesses, but there are certain cases, like here, where one is believed, that one is taken to have the authoritative validity of two witnesses. In other words, once we accept this testimony, then it's written down, it's solid, like two, and the next one witness that comes and says, no, you didn't see him, should not be able to go against the power of two witnesses. It was only one witness, but it has the power of two. So why we should actually believe that first one witness that he says he saw the murderer and not do a gladufa. So Allah says, you know what, this Mishnah, you have the wrong text and you have to change the text to, if there's one witness says I saw it and one says no, you didn't see it, we actually do accept the first witness and we don't do a gladufa. And Rabbi Yitzchak also said, change the text to say no, you don't do it. So Ula can solve his problem. However, Rabbi Chia amar teneh hayu orfin. Rabbi Chia says, don't change the text. The Mishnah is good as it is, as we learned it. And they would do egla arufa. Rabbi Chia kashya deula, but Rabbi Chia doesn't accept that principle of ula, and therefore should be that one is considered like two. And two should stand, and we know the murderers, and we should not do a gladufa. Lakashya kan bebatahat kan bezeacharzer. Rabbi Chia can explain. No, when Ula gave his ruling, that was talking about when they come one after the other. One witness comes and says, "I saw the murder," and we accept it. We write it down. Case closed. And then later on, the next day, another witness comes and says, "No, he didn't see it." Then that witness does not have the authority to overturn the first witness, and he agrees, Rabbi Chia would agree in that case, that you do not bring a gladufa. Our Mishnah, however, is talking about when the two witnesses come at the same time. They both walk in on the same day at the same time, and one says, "I saw the murder," one says, "You didn't." So then the first witness is never even registered. His testimony is never validated. And therefore, They cancel each other out, and that's why we do egla arufa in that case. So they came simultaneously. Good. So that's a good answer. But now we have a problem from the other cases of the Mishnah, that whose an inference from each case, the two inferences contradict each other. Tanan if one witness says, I saw the murderer, and two says, no, you didn't, so the two goes against the one, and throws them out, and they do egla arufa. We can infer from this that's only because it's two against one. So we can infer that if it was one and one, then the second one would not. And we're assuming that all this is simultaneous, right? Because we just established, according to the Bichia, that the whole Mishnah is about simultaneous. That should all be about the same case. And therefore, even when it's simultaneous, one against one, you would not do egla arufa. This is a challenge to the Bichia, right? This is a problem. The inference from this case. Now we say, well done, but the Bichia could be helped by the next case. When two said we saw it, but one said you did not see the murderer, then we do not do egla arufa, because we accept the two original ones that came. Two, even if they come simultaneously, two is going to be better, is going to be more important. So the fact that I had to give this case, we can infer that if it was one and one, then you would do egla arufa. One and one to come together, right? They cancel each other out. And you do egla arufa. So we have a problem here because we have a contradiction between the inference from this case and the inference from the second case, right? Because the inference from the first case would be that when it's one on one, you do not do egla arufa. And this would be a challenge to Rabbi Chiya, but the second one has an inference that you do egla arufa, which would support Rabbi Chiya. But in any case, we raise a new problem because now the Mishnah is self-contradictory, and how are we going to explain the Mishnah at all? So instead, rather the entire Mishnah must be talking about people who are disqualified from being proper witnesses. And we're going to bring in the principle of Rabbi Nechemya. De'amar, kol makom shemina Torah ayed ehad, halech acharov de'ot, vasu shete nashim be'ish ehad, kishne anashim be'ish ehad. Rabbi Nechemya says, anytime that the Torah says you can accept one witness, we follow a majority. See, when you have kosher witnesses, two men, then number doesn't matter. Once you have two, it's equal to 100, right? And we don't believe 100 kosher witnesses any more than you do two, because two is like 100%. That's when you have kosher valid witnesses. But in cases when you accept invalid witnesses, like women, like one witness, then you follow the majority. And if you had two women, for example, against one man, they would win, just like two men would win against one man. And therefore, that explains all the cases here. When you have the 2 versus 1, right, these two cases, the 2 always win. So we're talking about women, invalid witnesses, gamblers. So the 2 will always beat out the 1. And when you have 1 and 1 that come simultaneously, then they also will cancel each other out. This resolves the contradiction that we noted before between these cases, because according to this, these cases are brought to teach us this very lesson, that when you have invalid witnesses and you follow the majority no matter what. And so that's why each of these cases is needed on its own. And when you have just 1 against 1, then they just cancel each other out, certainly if they come simultaneously. Yet another variation of the same answer. In this variation, one valid witness, one man who's not a gambler and all that, is equal to even 100 women that will come afterwards, right? So one valid witness is equal to 100, and so they would, be of equal validity. So it's not talking about one man. Rather, it's talking about, let's say all women came, and one came first and said, I saw the murderer, and then another woman or many women said, no, you don't. And now, according to that, we have to just adjust Rabbi Nechemiah's statement to apply. Rabbi Nechemiah omer kol makom shemin Torah ad echad halech achad rov de'ot ve'asu shete nashim b'isha achat k'shtei anashim be'ish echad. Anytime the Torah believes one witness, you follow the majority, and two women against one woman, as opposed to two women against one man that we had here. So in this version, two women and one man would be equal, but two women against one woman, right? Bishachat would be like two men against one man. If they were valid witnesses, two beats one. So two for invalid witnesses, two against one, the two wins. But if you had two women and one man, then that would be equal testimony, and you'd proceed as if, however, it would be equal testimony. And according to that, we have to assume that the cases in our Mishnah are talking about when all women come, either one against one, they cancel each other out, or two against one, and we follow the majority. If it would be one valid male witness and two women, then they would be treated as equals, and not follow the majority. All right, so we solved that problem. Last point about this, why do I have to bring two cases where I have a majority, right? The whole point of bringing those cases was to teach me this rule that for invalid witnesses, you follow the majority. Just give me one of the examples, right? Either that the two witnesses said they saw the murderer, or that the two witnesses say that you didn't see the murderer. So why do I need both? Because if I had only one of the cases, I might have thought, when do I follow the majority? Only to be stringent and require doing egla arufa. So that would be when the two say we saw, when the one says I didn't see it, and the two said, one says, I saw the murderer, and two said, no, you didn't see it, and therefore we throw it out and we follow the majority and we require it. So maybe over there, lechumra, we would require, but lekula, if the two said that we saw the murder and one said we didn't, maybe since they're all invalid witnesses, we should say, well, do it anyway, do the gladufa anyway. So that we need that second case to teach us that even there, since the majority of invalid witnesses said that they saw the murderer, we will not do the eglarufa, and that's a kula. So that's why we need both of these cases to teach us this very special law that in invalid witnesses, we follow a majority. Next, when there were many murderers, known murderers, they stopped doing gladufa. Because we only do gladufa because we have an uncertainty. We don't know the identity. But once there were known murderers, even if we didn't know exactly who when did this particular murder, but because they're known, we know sometimes this gang did the murder, but you don't have evidence, so you can't convict them. So it was known who was doing this. Because we only explaining the Mishnah, when there were a lot of adulterers, they stopped doing Sotah. Why? Because the pasuk there regarding Sotah says, and the man will be cleared of transgression, and that woman shall bear her transgression. So you see, the Sotah only works when the man is himself innocent. Then the waters will check the woman. But if the man is himself not innocent, if he did something wrong, if he was not faithful, then the waters will not be effective on his wife. And the pasuk in Hosea says that everybody was committing adultery, all the men, and therefore Sotah waters were banned because they're not going to work. Mai ve'omer. Now, why do you have to bring in this extra pasuk? It's adding that maybe you'll think that his transgression, the husband, that will make the Sotah waters for his wife not effective, but for his daughters, And for sons and daughters, maybe it won't affect them. Who said it will affect them? Tana Tashema. That's why the pasuk comes in Hosea. Because a father is immoral, that will also undo the effectiveness for his daughters of the Sotah waters, for a daughter, and for his sons, such that if his daughters-in-law were not faithful, then the Sotah waters will not work for them. And furthermore, the pasuk adds more information and says, I understand if the husband committed adultery with a married woman, then he committed adultery, and that's why the Sotah waters won't work. But what if he did a lower immorality and he only had relations with an unmarried woman? So that's why the pasuk continues and says, Tashema ki hem im hazonot yifaredu v'im hakedeshot yizabechu. Because these men, they go and consort with zonot, kedeshot, these holy prostitutes, who may be single but still is immoral. Mai ve'a, and will cause the Sotah waters not to work. Mai ve'am lo yavin yilabet. And the rest of the pasuk says, and the people was without understanding and are distraught. אמר רבי אלעזר, אמר להם נביא לישראל, אם אתם מקפידים על עצמכם, מים בודקים נשותיכם? ואם לאו, אין המים בודקים נשותיכם. So the Navi is explaining as follows: if you men act properly yourselves, then you're a good role model, then you have moral authority to rebuke those around you, and then you have this tool that you can go and check the women in the family and keep them on the right path and know whether they sinned or not. But if you yourselves are immoral, then you're just a bunch of hypocrites. And because of that, you can't go and tell your wife, your daughter-in-law, and accuse them when you are not moral yourself. And because you don't have this tool to check if they were faithful or not, you're going to be distraught, have no understanding, and you're going to be suspicious and not know, did she sin, did she not sin, and you won't be able to rectify the situation. And so that is a consequence of their own sin. We end off the daf with a series of further agadot that have the same formulation. Misharabu ba'alei hana'a nit'a vetu hadinin v'nitkatkilu ha'ma'asim ve'en noach ba'olam. When people who love, desire physical, material things, so these are people that are drawn after that and will, if they're judges, are not going to pay close attention to justice, but will accept bribes. And therefore, the law became twisted, deeds became corrupted, and there was no comfort in the world. If there's no justice system, then nobody can live in peace. When people were showing favoritism in the law, judges are showing favoritism to one litigant or the other, then they stop fulfilling, a judge may not fear in the face of any man. He shall not respect one person or the other, not the rich, not the poor. But now they are showing favoritism. And the yoke of heaven, they took off of themselves. Instead, the judges accepted upon themselves the yoke of flesh and blood. They would answer to a powerful person, someone who bribed them, rather than doing things for the yoke of heaven on their shoulders. He had whispers in judgment. They would advise the judges surreptitiously, say this, do this. And so from that time, anger appeared and increased in Israel. Hashem judges in the midst of the judges, right? The judges, human judges, are supposed to be the emissaries and act in the name of God, and God is present when judges act justly and correctly. They're doing the highest work. However, when they are not, then Shekhinah leaves them. When people started following their greed, so then increased people who would say to bad that it's good and call good bad. And step comes after either the previous step. When people said that good and bad is good and good is bad, then everybody starts saying, whoa, whoa, terrible things, right? The whole society goes downhill and people suffer. When people who were drawing their spit, they would like spit a lot and just, disgusting, showing how haughty they are. Right? Look how I look down and spit upon everybody else. So then we had more haughty people with Matual Talmidim, Torah Chozet Alomedeha. And then people didn't want to be students, because to be a student you have to be humble and want to learn. And so there was no students, and then Torah was going around, who will study me? Who will study the Torah? And when these haughty people who were all proud and they from the outside they look like they're impressive, so the women of Israel would be marrying them, because in this generation people only see the face external appearances. They see a person who is dressed nice and looks rich and is all high on themselves, and so people look up to them, and then they want to marry them. But now we have a contradiction, because Master said that someone who's haughty, not only do other people hate him, nobody likes an arrogant person, even his own family members will not accept him. A person who is haughty will not abide, meaning he will not be accepted even by the people that he lives with. His own family says, oh, this guy is so arrogant, my husband is so arrogant. So this is a contradiction to here, where it says that the young woman would want to marry these haughty people, and the answer is at first, when they're first going out on dates, they say, oh, look, this person is so great, so important, he's so right, look up to him. But then once they're actually married and they get to know him, and you see he has nothing to support his arrogance, and he's really just a lowlife. So then she's disgusted by that haughtiness. When this tax on homeowners was implemented and given to the judges would impose, everybody has to pay them, homeowners have to pay them. Then from merchandise, then so it's kind of a bribery. So this is bribery and corruption increased, and good stopped. When judges said, I accept your favor, right? I hold your favor. And so they're accepting people to give them bribes or do good things for them. Then everybody does whatever they want. It's complete anarchy, because you can go and commit crimes and do all terrible things, and then you do a favor for the judge and you get off the hook. Those who are lowly were raised up and honored, and those who deserve honor were put down. Malchuta azla v'navla, and the monarchy, our sovereignty, went increasingly on the decline. Misharbu sareh ayin v'torfeh teref. מדברו מעמסי הלב וכובסי ידיים מלהלוות ועברו על מה שכתוב בתורה הישמר לך פן. When those who were stingy and were stealing and greedy for profit, when they increased, so then people who were hardening their heart and closing their hands from giving money increased. Right? When people are stingy and don't care, then they're not going to lend, and then they violate the Torah law that says, be careful, don't harden your heart and close your hand. If your brother is in need, you have to lend to him, and if you don't lend to him, then you violate Hisham Elecha. But because people were so stingy, they violated this law. Yeshua talks about women who stretched their neck high and had wanton eyes, being seductive. And then there were more sotahs because they caused there to be more adultery, and then there were more sotah cases. But when there were so many, as we said before, once adultery became so when only these women, let's say they were married women, and so they went and did this, so if they were sinning, so sotah waters would work. But then it went so out of hand that the men also were immoral, and then the sotah waters were not working at all. When people who accepted gifts increase, so then the days and years decreased. He who hates gifts will live, but when you accept gifts, then you're beholden to those people, and then you're going, especially if you're a judge, just taking bribes. When those who were boastful of heart increased, so it increased dispute or factions in Israel. In other words, when people are arguing about a halacha or anything, if they act, it's good to argue, but you have to do so out of humility, that you want to actually learn. But when people are arguing just to prove how smart they are and how great they are, then they're not seeking after the truth, so they're actually going to listen and learn from each other. So this is machloket shelo l'shem shamayim, and then machloket increases. The word machloket can mean controversy. It also can mean factions or sects, groups. And so there were more and more different factions in Israel, which was terrible. When the students of Shammai and Hillel did not serve their rabbi sufficiently. Students in those days would not only learn from their masters, but they would also serve them, carry their books, help them with chores, put on their shoes, right? All kinds of things, because that's part of the service. It's like being a full student and following them around and doing everything for them. And so that would be a full, strong relationship in which the student would also learn from everything the master did, every single detail. But then at some point they would come to class and pay attention more or less, but then were not serving them sufficiently. So they lost out on the details of what their teachers were teaching them. And because of that, so then they started forgetting those details. No, I thought he meant this, I think he meant that. They were not learning and taking notes as carefully as they were before. And so more controversy and more factions increased, and the Torah tragically became like two Torahs. You see, beforehand, during the time of Hillel and Shammai themselves, they only disagreed about a few things. There was a relative unity, at least within the Pharisees. But then after that, because of a lack of study and administering to their teachers, they lost more and more, and that's how it turned into two separate Torahs altogether. When those who received charity from the non-Jews increased, so then Israel was above and the non-Jews were low, and Israel was in and they were out. Now, this sounds like it's a good thing, but it's a euphemism. It means the opposite. That because they were accepting charity from non-Jews, it means that the Jews were not taking care of themselves, right? The rich Jews should take care of the poor Jews. The community should be self-sustaining and not have to go and accept money from non-Jews. And so that is a sign of that internal weakness, not taking care of each other. And so from that point on, Israel actually became low, and the non-Jews went up. The Jewish people were behind, and the non-Jews were ahead. And so that completes the series of Agadot, and then we're going to see tomorrow, it will go back to the Mishnah and continue discussing those topics. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.